So now I'd like to welcome our open plenary panelists. If they would join us at the table, please, and we'll get started in just a moment. Thanks. Now, in the meantime, open your app. So panelists, please come forward. In the meantime, those of you in the audience, open your mobile app and go to this, in the schedule, go to this session and click on that, and it'll give you 4 questions, right? And it'll be obvious, 4 questions. Take your time. You don't have to answer it right now. It's a live poll, and we'll aggregate the results and share them with you later in the day. I didn't really want to do it live because last time I goofed up a lot. So, if you would, please it's really a survey to help us understand the challenges you're facing, and will inform our path going forward. So now, I'd like to introduce the members of our panel. Again, the discussion, Earl and both Carlisle recognize, our bridge to the future. So, to my immediate left, Gerry Hamilton, Director of Facilities and Energy Management at Stanford University. Please hold your applause, but let me introduce all of our panelists. So Gerry, welcome. To his left is Sally McGarrahan. She's the Associate Vice Chancellor of Facilities Services at the University of California, Berkeley. Welcome, Sally. To her left is Tom Nyquist. Tom is Executive Director of Facilities Engineering and Executive Director of Facilities Engineering and Campus Energy. Yes, we got that right this time? Okay. At Princeton University, the other Stanford. I'm going to get in trouble for that one, right? The guys in Harvard are going to knife me later. No, but there's some healthy competition. It's really fun. To Tom's left, my pleasure to welcome Mary Quintana, who's Director of Asset Management and Utilities at Brock University, which is in Ontario. Welcome, Mary. To her left, Lindsey Rowell, Chief Office of Energy, Sustainability, and Transportation in the Office of the Chancellor, California State University. Welcome, Lindsey. Big panel. To her left, Ron Supporta. He is a supporter, but it's Supporta. Ron is the Chief Operating Officer at University of Toronto. And I really should say Toronto, right? There's no second T in that. Welcome, Ron. Megan Sturl is to his left. Megan is Director of Engineering and Utilities, Facilities Management, Montana State University. Welcome, Megan. And last but not least, I'm sure that Paul has experienced this most of his life. His last name is Zmick. But he's such a good sport and really a great reason. Paul Zmick, Director of Engineering and Utilities, University of Virginia. But Paul, it actually is Energy and Utilities, right? Yes. Okay. Energy and Utilities, University of Virginia. Let's give them a nice round of applause to our panelists. Okay, and so the cadence for today, really the theme for this, the metaphor, is Bridge to the Future. So how are how are we going to lower carbon, maintain resilience, have reliability, and do it efficiently? And do it all magically with all or none of the funds required, right? That's the big question. So Tom, I'm gonna start with you. At Princeton, you're really well underway with the Tiger plant, right? Which is the first phase of modernization of a nearly 300-year-old campus, correct?
Correct, yes.
So how's it going? You got about 800 boreholes. The plant is actually lightly commissioned. What's happening with the modernization at Princeton University?
So Princeton University is in the process of adding a lot of buildings. We're looking at a construction program between 1.5 and 2 million square feet. We could not handle that kind of load with our existing plant. So we had to step back and figure out what we want to do with a new plant. And as part of that, we looked at our infrastructure that we had in the ground, and our steam system dated back before World War I in many sections. So there was a lot of deferred maintenance there. So we launched on a master plan, which is, I want to really emphasize how important it is to have the master plan as you're starting out on something like this and look long term. This was back in around 2016, and carbon and climate change issues were starting to be a big deal. And we have a lot of climate scientists at the university, so we asked for a carbon emissions limit before we did the study, instead of putting in boilers and all that kind of stuff, and then getting the carbon limit after we do all that. And that was super important. And because it was the faculty coming up with our emissions goal, the president bought into it. And when the president bought into it, then the trustees bought into it. So as Rob said, we just finished phase one. It went online about 4 months ago. 2 very large heat pumps in there. And we have a geo-exchange system, and we're in the process of installing a lot of hot water pipe and converting our buildings over. We also put a heat pump in the existing plant, and we have a greenfield campus that's starting to be built, and we applied the same kind of thinking over there, and we have a geo-exchange plant on the greenfield to handle new apartments which are being designed to passive house standards. So just on their own, they're going to be very, very efficient, and then we're going to heat and cool them with an efficient system, and there's going to be a racquetball center and over there, and it's going to continue to grow. And there's a lot of solar, so that piece of the campus is going to be really, really low carbon footprint.
And so Tom, in driving over the bridge to the future, you actually had in your GPS the carbon destination that was required.
Except for money, the most important part of this study.
Oh, yeah. Oh, we'll come back to the money part. So Ron, University of Toronto, not quite as, certainly vintage, a lot of vintage buildings, University of Toronto, an urban campus, I would say slightly different than, the leafy Princeton campus, slightly different. But you're undertaking something similar. You're really in the first phase. It's called Project LEAP. Tell us a little bit about how University of Toronto is, what's the bridge and what's the future?
Yeah, of course. Thank you. And good morning, everybody. Well, Project LEAP is our massive first step in that bridge to the future, as you call it. And the primary target there is for us to be able to exceed the UN IPCC targets for carbon reduction. So if you're not familiar with that, that's what everyone calls the science-based targets. And we've assembled a plan that actually gets us there well in advance of the 2030 deadline, which we think is quite exciting. Fundamentally, it's electrification, to answer that question, where we're looking at moving our natural gas boilers to electricity. And even though there's a realization that it is significantly more expensive in our jurisdiction, it's about 10 times more expensive to use electricity than natural gas, we've been able to make the finances work by also coupling it with deep energy retrofits. So we take all of the savings that we generate from doing deep energy retrofits in our buildings, and we use that to purchase the more expensive fuel source. Or where we get the financial savings to work is through a carbon tax avoidance. One thing that I think is important to note, though, it doesn't mean you need carbon tax to make that work. We actually made a really conscious decision to not exceed the savings more than we needed to pay back the financing, and we took all those excess savings into carbon. And that's sort of how we built the business case, the business plan behind it. And if there's any sort of forward-looking projection, the other key to success that I thought was how we've utilized outcome-based procurement. I think that's hugely important in these types of spaces where we actually in-house developed a concept study to make this work, but then we put that out to market and we asked people to tell us how they can do it better, faster, cheaper. And in fact, what came back was hugely innovative. We went from thinking we'd only have electric boilers to this really innovative approach of multi-stage heat pumps, all sorts of other solutions that really allowed us to bring down that carbon level, actually saved us in excess of $50 million by using that approach. And then got us to the target a lot faster.
And Ron, I know you presented on that at the workshop for this conference last year. It's on our website. We'll make sure people can easily find it. It really is, I think, a very instructive case study of, again, knowing your destination and actually understanding who could help you drive. You don't have to do it alone. Let's get a caravan. And so thanks. We're going to come back to what's happening in Toronto. Gerry, here in Stanford, you know, I guess I would consider Stanford really sort of the first one over the bridge, right? I mean, like almost 10 years ago, you moved from steam cogen to hot water distribution, energy recovery, innovating continuously. Am I correct that I recall in 2012, maybe one of the catalysts was AB 32 and really like a climate target. Ron just mentioned, you know, having a carbon price in the business model. Was that a catalyst, and does it continue to drive the experience at Stanford, just keeping carbon and, you know, continuously achieving lower standards?
Rob, so I started at Stanford in 2010, and we were right in the middle of researching options, designing options, doing scenario playing. Carbon really was a big deal, but it's not like today. We've got about an 80% reduction in Scope 1 and Scope 2. We spend way more time now with staff, with expenses, doing compliance than we did then. So carbon's much more important than it was then, although it was very important. But my message to the team here is the thing that really made the difference is while carbon was important, we were also concerned about doing something innovative from an energy standpoint. We have a district chilled water system, and there's a lot of waste BTUs. How do we get those out? Right. We did the math, and if we could get those BTUs out, that would satisfy 90% of our annual district heating load. That's huge, right? So that was a driver, which obviously had carbon benefits. In California, we always have been, we always will be worried about water. We use a lot of water at our central plant and a lot more at our old central plant. So that was a driver. Right. We had a legacy steam system. I guess we could raise hands. Everybody's got a legacy steam system, 100 years old. It's not really fun and exciting to, you know, do a capital project to renew your steam system. So we were looking at hot water as options. You start putting these drivers together, and suddenly you get a project that comes together with a highly electrified central plant with heat recovery, chillers, and hot water distribution. The nice thing about at Stanford, as Lincoln had mentioned, we wear all the hats, right? We're the owners, we're the operators, we're the utility. We run our own water utility as well. So we were able to mix these drivers from across the board. And I don't think, if we didn't have this whole suite of drivers, if we were only targeting carbon, I don't know what we would have ended up with, but it would have been significantly different, and I don't think it would have had the total value. And in the end, I just kind of want to mimic what's coming from down the table here, is that this was a very sound economic decision. It actually was the same or lower present value of other options. So, you know, we weren't paying a premium. We did not have a cost for carbon then. I think going forward, we will have a cost for carbon in future innovations.
So there was a target, but there was a stick, but not a carrot, right? For
at the time, we wanted to get below 1990 emissions.
Right. Okay.
Which we did. We were able to kind of blow through there, but we were thinking the future is going to unfold. Let's give ourselves a situation where we can adapt going forward. When again, electrification gave us that opportunity as well.
And I think very, very helpful, Gerry. And I think universally that really is sort of it's not a conundrum, but it's really kind of where we are right now is what arrows are in the quiver, what is the target, how do you solve, what's the trajectory, what's the pace? Megan, I know at Montana State, you know, really a smaller campus compared to some, Bozeman, big sky country, right, beautiful. Your plant began operating in 1922, so over a century old. But the campus, the energy system, like Lincoln mentioned, you know, you're evolving with a number of tools, geoexchange, energy recovery, et cetera. Tell us what's happening at Montana State.
Yeah, absolutely. For everybody that is not familiar with Montana State, we're in Bozeman, Montana, 5,000 feet of elevation. We have 8,000 heating degree days. The last 2 winters, we've reached temperatures of -40. These are challenging conditions for an energy transition, but we have all of the above approach, as you mentioned. And this is really, I think, a key point to our success here. Unlike some other campuses, we've implemented a variety of different solutions on campus, and we have a long history of doing that. Starting in 2009, we implemented our first 4th generation system. That heat pump plant is connected to 4 buildings and includes a geothermal bore field. Last year, we implemented our first 5th generation energy system. We have several buildings that will be connected this year. And we have many other buildings that are standalone but have been designed with heat pump, mechanical systems, and with geothermal fields. And all of those are prepared to be connected to our 5th generation system in the future. So flexibility has been key for us. We really aren't doing large standalone energy projects. We're bolting on these solutions to other capital projects. And that's really given us 15 years of hands-on experience with a variety of solutions. And we're prepared to implement solutions as projects come up.
And would it be safe to say that, so you implement a project, you kind of get the data and the results, you see, really what's happening, and that gives you both guidance. It's sort of like me driving a car in a city, right? The GPS, turn left, right? But are you incorporating, sort of the results as you travel? Is that?
Absolutely.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the best things about testing these technologies over the last 15 years. We haven't tested just one, we've tested several. And every iteration, we're hoping to make improvements on that,
Right.
Going forward.
Right, very good. Thanks, Megan. I've never been to Bozeman.
It's a beautiful place, just don't come in the winter.
I was going to say, maybe April.
Or June.
Or June, yeah. the 2 weeks of summer? Yeah, all right. Sally, so here, coming back to California, and thanks so much, Gerry, coming back to California at University of California, Berkeley, you don't only have one campus, you have 10 campuses. And as I recall, they're in, almost, I think Lincoln mentioned, multiple climate zones. So how are you approaching, this journey with 10 cars? Like, you got to get 10 cars over the bridge. What does it look like? Is there a strategy that's emerging, Sally?
Yeah. So, as you say, we have 10 campuses, all very different climates, different geographies, different ages, different types of building, different academic priorities. So, coalescing all of that into a single plan is really not possible. Right. So what we're doing is collaborating on lessons learned, sharing information, and working together to identify the multiple opportunities for addressing this that exist across the campuses. We have 3 campuses, Davis, Santa Cruz, and Berkeley, who have completed their path to the future and a path to a carbon-free future, and the other 7 are working hard on developing their plans. And all of this is being overseen by our Office of the President. They have the thankless job of herding the obstreperous cats. So they have created a series of task forces that identify particular streams in planning that need to be looked at, from technologies to social justice. And sort of those task forces are working together to identify the themes and the solutions for solving this massive problem. Once all of us have prepared our information, UCOP will roll that up into a sort of a single report and identify the themes that we can all act on, and then very likely, and we're all certainly hoping for it, put forward a shared financial plan, because as we all know, identifying the funding for these projects on a single campus, let alone 10, is a huge challenge. We also have a centralized procurement office that can help us with master contracts and procuring on a large scale. So very separate and also aligned.
Because each of them have their own, as you mentioned, vintage buildings, climate conditions, infrastructure, research. The campuses themselves have different mission, correct? And I would be remiss, and I wanted to mention to Sally, that here at IDA, and later today, the U.S. Department of Energy Loan Programs Office is here. And they're very interested in aggregation of projects to a scale, because Sally, sounds like you're talking in the billions, right?
Yes.
Yeah, maybe among friends, right? It's So in fact, the U.S. government is here to help. I know that's cliche, but they are, and I'll introduce her at lunch. And so, I applaud the work, Sally, that's happening. Is it really to kind of aggregate these different flavors of ice cream and then making one sort of sundae of it it's going to be fun, right?
Yes.
Good answer.
That's one word for
Yeah, it's a euphemism, isn't it? So Lindsey, so Mary has 10 campuses. At California State University, you have 23. 23 campuses. And again, I think, California, you have every climate zone from arid to temperate, and, really a lot of different flavors. How are you thinking about, what does the bridge to your future look like? And how many cars are in this caravan?
We're actually done.
Oh.
Yeah, we're finished. Did it for free. It was great. I joke because otherwise we'd cry, right? So yeah, 23 campuses, 500,000 students, 60,000-ish so faculty. So there's a lot of opinions, a lot of priorities in how we get this done. And we've set a 2045 goal in alignment with the state of California for the system-wide carbon neutrality effort. And I'll kick myself later for saying this, but that includes scope 3 and no carbon offsets. So it is a huge challenge for us. I can obviously repeat some of the things my esteemed panelists have shared already with regard to deep energy efficiency and, strategized procurement efforts, master contracts, things like that to try and get there. As mentioned, we'll talk about the money or the lack thereof later. The CSU has at this time about a $7 billion deferred maintenance backlog. So one of our strategies has been, as we pursue these energy projects, we try to knock out deferred maintenance with it as well. And partnering those types of projects together does a couple of things. One, it's two birds, obviously where there's opportunities to break into a hard lid or trench ground and you're making repairs too, you're getting a little bit more bang for your buck, but also it frees up funding. So in the public space, the way we're funded for these efforts tends to be through operational budget. So it is a real challenge. And then, I think the other thing that we've been trying to do in lieu of having hundreds of millions of dollars, shout out to LPO out there who's been helping us.
Alanya.
I think we're really trying to sort of present a cornucopia of solutions, and that means that while we're waiting for those big dollars to overhaul central plants and electrify millions of square feet of real assets, we're also nickel and diming. So, saving a little bit of money on our pro cards at the end of the month to do some lighting projects or buy some meters and get those installed, looking at new ways to strategize our control systems. And there is still some low-hanging fruit with regard to lighting out there, constant air volume, ventilation, controls, programming. So there's still opportunities. So the strategy has been approach this, continue to work and plan on the large-scale implementation for electrification, and then chip away at the problem with little projects. I think it's the only way we can do it in a 23-campus system.
Yeah, I mean, no doubt, Lindsey. It's a continuous improvement. I mean, you have to maintain and deliver, right? Reliable space for the mission of the institutions. It is a little bit like repairing a plane while flying, right? There's some of that.
And writing the manual, that's what we like to say. Build the plane while flying it and writing the manual.
And write the manual? Yeah. So thanks, Lindsey. I'm going to come back to you on a couple of those things. But Mary, at Brock University, you're in a modernization activity right now, right? Modernizing the campus infrastructure. You've moving to electrify your district energy system, electric boiler, heat pump, sort of a number of the arrows that I think are in most people's quiver. But if you could tell us a little bit about the bridge via efficiency and decarbonization, but more importantly, to tag on to Lindsey, what role has federal government funding, has that been a sort of a fulcrum, a lever to help your institution advance?
Oh yes, definitely. They have been a huge contributor, and I will circle back to give people a little bit of context. We are in Ontario, Canada, about 20 minutes away from Niagara Falls, beautiful area surrounded by wineries. So that makes us very unique. We are on a UNESCO Biosphere Reserve. We have the privilege and the responsibility to be one of the few institutions that have that blessing and restriction too. So within that, over the years, since 2018 and even before that, we have been fortunate enough to receive federal funding and provincial funding for numerous projects. Those have enabled us to really basically, they airlifted us. When we received the first round of federal funding, we were able to modernize our district energy system with an investment of over $20 million. We have new engines, new chillers. We have brand new piping for the domestic hot water system. It really made a huge difference because it laid the foundations for what we are doing now. Right now, when we are talking about electrification, we're talking about heat pumps. All of that also became part of the solution, but again, building on those foundations that we already have. With this round of federal funding, it made it even more appealing, and it was very competitive. Not many institutions, both hospitals or municipalities in the broader public sector, received any funding. And the cost of carbon is rising. There was a great business case, and when you layer the federal funding on top of that, it makes it, basically, it was called a cash cow. This project, there's no way we can't do it. And when we heard that, it was so encouraging that now the whole project is seen as something that is really advocating for a campus as a living lab. We are enriching the student experience, doing tours all the time. We are launching an engineering program in the fall, so it's now becoming part of that. And when we're talking about that bridge, something that we want to continue doing, going back to the Campus as a Living Lab, is education and awareness. Technology will only take us so far. We also need to tackle the human problem behind it. We need to educate people. We need to engage them, to raise awareness. And we have to work on that too. And I don't see Brock moving forward to next phases, regardless of the federal funding and our ability to capitalize on it, without more engagement and more participation from our community.
Excellent. Very good points, Mary. Thank you. And it is so important that we cultivate the next generation, that the students that are your customers, that they understand, what the assets, how they work, what they're capable of. So really, props to you. Thanks. Really glad you participate. Paul, at University of Virginia, I think there's a similar paradigm happening, right? An economic engine in Charlottesville, maybe not as old as Princeton, but certainly UVA has legacy, history, et cetera. But you also have some new buildings coming in, and you're in the process, I guess, and share with us, modernizing the district energy system, sort of taking the shift, the Stanford shift, let's say. Tell us what the increments and what's happening at UVA these days.
Okay, Rob. Yeah, you're right. UVA is a campus of grounds of 19 million gross square feet of buildings, and we have a diversity of buildings. We have over 500 buildings, some of them over 200 years old and some of them brand new. And our heating system, we have seven different thermal heating loops. And the buildings connected to those loops define what our heating temperatures are. It ranges from 200-pound steam to what I'm going to talk about in a minute is a 115-degree hot water heating system for a new building. But those the seven thermal loops will have a different approach for sustainability and decarbonization based on the temperatures and based on the infrastructure for each of those. And we are fortunate to have two of the loops that are relatively new and supporting new construction. So the one that you had mentioned is was triggered by a new bioscience building we're building at the Fontaine Research Park, which previously had been a group of buildings, clinical and research buildings that were on standalone building systems. And our 2018 master plan included a central plant. When the 350,000 square foot Paul and Diane Manning Institute of Bioscience was introduced, that triggered the construction of the central plant out there. And at that time, in 2019, our president and board of visitors had adopted our sustainability goals of 2030 carbon neutrality, 2050 fossil fuel free. So instead of building, our base was a business as usual plant, which we had just built to support another medical building in sort of a remote part of grounds, which was natural gas, heat recovered chillers, and traditional chillers. We decided to use that as a base case, but then look at full electrification, including electric boilers and geo-exchange systems. And so we ended up, moving towards we ended up with a plant that's based on 115-degree heating water to the medical center, to the new building. We were able to work with that project team and determine the lowest temperature we could go.
115 degrees F.
Degrees, yeah. And then, so we did geo-exchange, heat recovered chillers, and electric resistance boilers for peaking. So it's a fossil fuel-free plant, which was our goal to demonstrate that. And because of that low heating water temperature, we were able to get these high COPs. But it wasn't, we realized a 20% cost premium for that. We were able to sell that as a demonstration to our sustainability commitments. And that project was developed sort of right when the MEP escalation was occurring. So we did have some budget challenges where we sort of wanted to design more than we could, and we had to scale it back a little bit, the number of thermal storage tanks, the number of boreholes, and really just make it the minimum plant to support that building. But it has a footprint that can grow to provide heating for the entire park eventually.
So now at UVA, you really have a whole toolkit. You have a range of technologies. Let's talk about the technologies. And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, there are 2 microphones in the respective aisles, and we're happy to entertain a question from each of you. If you just please, make your way to the microphone. I'll try to acknowledge you, and if you'd like to put a question to any of our panel. But let me lob this question. So, what year is this? It's 2024. Some of you had 2025 objectives, some 2030. I mean, some very, aggressive ambitions. Has there been a suite of technologies that sort of have, the primary tools in the kit, hammer, saw, let me rephrase, geo-exchange, heat pumps, et cetera. What does it look like? What's the first tool you're grabbing? Mary? Oh, I'm sorry, Sally. Sally, Mary. Yeah, Sally. Sorry.
So we're developing a suite of technologies at Berkeley. Just for some context, we are an old campus established in the 1800s. Some of our utilities go back to the 1800s. We've been served by a cogen plant since the 1980s. So we have the benefit in some ways of all of that reaching the end of its life. So we are planning on a total transformation, and we're going to fully electrify our campus. We're replacing our cogen plant with a new heat recovery heat pump plant, central plant, replacing our steam lines with hot and chilled water, and converting our buildings from steam to hot water. Very interested in the 115 degrees. But critically, we need resiliency. A university campus can't function without a reliable and resilient source of energy and heat. So we're installing solar and fuel cells as a bridge measure, and battery backup. So those are the current technologies, but we're very aware as we implement phase 1 that our later phases are probably going to use different technologies. So we're leaving the door open for those, but we're focusing on getting going now, given the time it takes to implement these kind of changes.
Very good. Thank you. Thanks, Sally. Anyone else care to add?
Well,
Lindsey, and then I'll go Lindsey and then Paul. Yeah. Okay.
I don't know that it's really a technology, but just wanting to build off on Sally's notion of resiliency and say that one of the strategies that we've implemented is developing a climate resilient infrastructure guideline to pair with our critical infrastructure reports for all the campuses to help campuses prioritize the 2 pennies that they have to rub together and ensure that they are tackling the infrastructure needs in an order that is cognizant of the cascading climate impacts and hazards that might be either unique to their area, not unique to their area, something they've suffered from before. Yesterday in the higher ed workshop, I mentioned hurricanes. So California's got some pretty nifty new climate hazards. And I think that's been a really good investment for the campuses and a really important tool for them to plan for their resilient future.
Well, and Lindsey, I mean, it's not lost on many of us that, California has no rain for a year and then a whole year's rain in a weekend, right? And so, and you have to, if you're operating a campus, you have to adapt for that. Not to mention, the fifth leg of the stool, an occasional earthquake or so. But Paul, I know. What are the technologies that look like the primary, implements?
So we have two stories. I
you,
mentioned we have 7 thermal loops, and one of those thermal loops is steam to our medical center and research. And that's about half our thermal load, half our carbon footprint. And we don't have a solution for that. And that's the one, I attended the workshop yesterday and heard about the heat pumps now making steam, and the micromodular nuclear reactors might be a steam solution in the future. So we're sort of putting half of our carbon footprint aside and waiting on technology to develop, because the medical center loves steam, and it would be an incredibly expensive project to move that 7 million square feet off steam. The other half of academic grounds, we're reducing, first we're pursuing building efficiency, right? We're even in the process of part of the calculus is demolition of buildings that are energy inefficient, and then new construction and retrofits that are super efficient. So we got to reduce the load, and then we reduce the temperatures, reduce the heating water temperatures, and that gives us access to more technology and more efficiency. Couple the heat recovery chillers with geoexchange where possible, and then use for the peaking, move towards like electric resistance heaters, or as more technology develops, something like that.
Well, one of the themes I heard, also, thank you, Paul, one of the themes is flexibility, right? You don't want to lock in, because there are new technologies emerging. Mary, how are you thinking about, maintaining some optionality if the route needs to get changed or it's a better route, right? Tell us, what's your thinking in terms of technologies, tools?
We certainly want to remain current. For us, flexibility, adaptability, it's one of the major components that we take into consideration when making decisions about what technologies to incorporate, how much to invest, when to invest in those technologies. And one that has really come to the forefront in the past few years has been Internet of Things, big data analytics, and it's one that we collect all of these massive amounts of data from our district energy systems, from our building automation systems. How can we use it better? How can we customize that into something that really gives us more information that we can continuously optimize, that we can use for learning, that we can share with each other? We have had great successes with more preventive maintenance just by using that technology, and it's continuously evolving. It's maybe the pace of Internet of Things and big data analytics is even faster than the technologies that we are looking at when it comes to battery storage and district systems in general. So that's one technology that I think we should not overlook, because it's going to become more and more prominent and give us that many other tools to find the next big win for our own campuses and systems.
Thank you very much, Mary. That's a very important, I think, component to the bridge to the future. And yesterday in the workshop, Phaedra is here, the AI kind of level. I know Harrison Shapiro is here, a graduate of Princeton, has developed basically an algorithm that analyzes not only the energy intensity, but the carbon price, the electricity grid, because really what you're talking about is, as we move forward, sector coupling, so that the electric utilities that you interact with have an appreciation for what you do for them, right? Tom, at Princeton, how has that experience shaped, both your kind of toolkit and the flexibility that Mary, and also big data? I know you've been collecting, terabytes of data at Princeton. Is that informing your actions or your planning or both?
Yeah, the simple answer is yes. We have 5-minute data going back to 2003. So we know what our loads are. We can give those to our consultants, and then they can use that for analysis. One of the other things that we have for flexibility is we put in thermal energy storage back in 2005, and it proved to be a great thing for us because we're on real-time pricing. So when the price of power goes up, we're able to turn off our chillers and use our thermal energy storage. We also have cogen. And so we have relatively low costs in the university because we essentially don't have a capacity or transmission tag. When we built our new plant, we put in hot water and chill water storage to get more benefit from that. But we're blessed, we have a lot of land and we can do that. But as far as technology and flexibility, the tanks have really been helpful for us.
So you're keeping, you're not solely relying on a new electric saw, battery electric saw. You've actually got your grandfather's, maybe it's not. You have a handsaw in your toolkit if you need to do something.
Guess so, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
But
bad analogy. My bad. I should have stayed with the car.
But Rob, let me just. I wanted to add one more thing about the tanks. We just updated our master plan to keep it current, and we got into more detail with the tanks and how they interplay with the geo-exchange, which is seasonal heat storage, and we have basically daily and weekly heat storage in the tanks. So we were actually able to reduce the future board count for the university, and it was quite a savings. So that interplay was really, really helpful for us.
Thanks, Tom. And I mean, Princeton is literally, a model for innovation and achievement. So no doubt, and props to you and Ted Boer for really bringing all this, kind of experience forward. I heard another thing. Well, two other things: resilience, resilience and flexibility. Let's talk about resilience, right? Because if your campus is solely reliant or primarily reliant, on the electric grid, is that an appropriate strategy in the climate world we live in? Gerry, any thoughts there?
Well, that's been a big discussion point for years, and I think erroneously folks thought that with our cogen we could easily island like it was the ultimate backup generator, and it was not.
Right.
When we had grid issues, the cogen tripped, our old equipment took a long time to get back up. And so as we think about it now, what is the balance of on-site backup versus maybe we should be working with our community, right? Let's expand the pool of stakeholders. And so we have the luxury, I think anybody involved with district energy, any large campuses, you have the attention of your utility providers that maybe a commercial building operator doesn't, right? They don't have the scale.
Because of your scale.
We know our customers, we know our suppliers, and so we have some projects in the works right now where we are looking at significantly hardening our region. It'll benefit us, it'll benefit our community. And there's a trade-off there. We could, put all our money into trying to come up with this great microgrid, which there's always chinks in your armor, right? We know there's nothing that's perfect. Or do we invest upstream and bring more people into it? So it's an ongoing debate. We're trying to harden on campus, but also harden our region. And that's kind of a plug I'd put out in general for us. Like, don't undervalue your contacts, your resources, your access. Think of all the emails you're dreading of going back to next week. Who are these pain points? Is it a customer that's nagging you? Are you behind on some air quality report, right? Is there some water regulation? Engage with these people. Go all in with them. What are their problems? What are their pain points? Because they've got them, and maybe they get brought into the solution. They've got money, they've got resources, but I think, grid reliability is a microcosm of we got to think bigger. Well,
General Eisenhower, later president, said, if you can't solve a problem, make it bigger.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, so you're really saying like the amoeba of Stanford needs to expand, right, and kind of encapsulate more. Is that a strategy, Ron? Is that something that is in Project LEAP in Toronto?
Well, to maybe hit on your first point, one of my biggest nightmares when we electrify is that eventually on a Saturday at 2 a.m. in the middle of February when it's minus 30 or minus 25, we're going to have a blackout, and all of a sudden I have a massive campus with no heating, let alone no power. So it's definitely something from a resiliency perspective that we think quite a lot about. What we've done to sort of tackle that at the first step is right when we started our master plan, we put a call out to our local utility, and we've actually had a series. I think we met with them bi-weekly for 2 years, It's frustrating. I don't know if everyone's utility is as bureaucratic as some of ours are, but ultimately, pardon me, we came up with what I thought was a pretty good solution, and it's primarily leveraging our microgrid that we have on campus and moving to sort of what we call a multinodal strategy. So today we've got one feed coming in from that utility. It does our entire campus, and that's definitely a risk and a resiliency issue. And what we're doing now is we're implementing new nodes where we can bring in multiple feeds and have them interconnected and working with them. And when we need to, we can actually start to distribute and move some of those loads around. We've made sure that they come from different substations on their end, different feed grids that come into the city at a provincial level. And this way we can diversify and use that for resiliency.
Very interesting, Ron, and maybe that does echo what Gerry said, is like, if you look larger and look to the partners, I would think, you don't want just one extension cord for your whole, if Taylor Swift is in the house, you need more than just one plug, right? University of Toronto, no joke, 100,000 people a day on their campus. It is an economic engine. It's not just kids playing Frisbee. It's there's that, but... So tell me then, so how are others, Megan, big sky country, fairly remote, are you your own sort of lifeboat, or how are you thinking about resilience?
Yeah, definitely. It's a big topic of consideration, especially as we continue to electrify campus. I think, like Ron mentioned, we've worked with our utility. We have in the past had a single feed to campus, and we've been working on bringing a second, just for that specific, case. Especially in the heating times, we really don't want to rely on one electrical feed to serve all of campus. I think for resiliency on a smaller scale, we're also really focused on decentralization of our efforts. We talked a little bit about our 4th and 5th generation energy systems, and those typically are connecting just a few buildings. Instead of having a campus-wide solution, we're really looking at a smaller scale solution, both that we can implement faster and take advantage of opportunities as they arise, but we're also not locked into technologies. We can evolve as things are evolving in the space.
So a bite at the apple, one at a time.
Yeah.
Sally, and then I'll come to you, Tom. So this notion of resilience and kind of, the connectivity, if you represent, 10 million, 20 million, it's such square feet. Not only are you a big customer and a big load, but you could also be maybe, a grid battery. You could be, there's some value add that you could get back. Is that part of what the discussion is or should be with the providers?
I think it depends on who your provider
Yeah,
is.
true.
Ours is a somewhat reluctant partner in developing resources. What I do want to mention, though, about resiliency is that there is the utility side, and there's working with your utilities, and there's working with your technology. There's also working with your campus occupants, because you have to identify what your critical loads are that you're trying to support with the resiliency. And when you go to your faculty and your researchers, they will say they want it all, and that's just not possible. And so one part of the effort that, it's not financially possible, I suppose, theoretically. One thing we've been working on over these last several years is developing work groups to talk through what those critical loads are, and then the companion piece to that is having them internally organize their use of space and their use of power so that they have a clear plan for switching to those, to support just those critical loads. So it's both sides that you need to address to have a coherent plan for resolving this.
And so you're activating people, so in the event of an event, right?
Yes.
That they understand, like, the cluster, where what mission critical loads, and where.
The red outlets are the ones that are on backup power, the white ones are not, just right down to that level.
Okay. Yep. Well, so I think that's an important takeaway. Thank you, Sally. But I'm going to bump it to Tom, who at Princeton, Superstorm Sandy, 2012, 8 million people without power, 21 states, devastating. I think $80 billion of economic loss. But Princeton was a lifeboat, right? In this other words, like sort of, the darkness. Tell us how that was a success of your microgrid and CHP and interacting with the grid. Is that part of your toolkit going forward?
Yeah, it's something we have to address because our cogen is 30 years old, and as I mentioned earlier, we're going to replace it. We're putting in geo-exchange, and we're trying not to burn anything on campus. However, we did have a Superstorm Sandy event where we needed on-site generation. Since 2012, when that happened with Sandy, we put in a new substation. It's a 69,000 volt substation located right next to the utility substation on Route 1. They bring 9 feeds into that substation, and out of that substation, we take 3 feeds all underground to our substation right next door. And even during Sandy, their 69 kV system did not go down. At the time, we happened to be on the 26 kV system, and that's the system that went down. So we've greatly hardened our electrical reliability, and that's really good if there's a problem on the utility system, the distribution level. However, as we've seen across the country, sometimes the entire grid goes down for crazy reasons, everything from ice to fires. So, we could be subject to that in the future. So while we're trying to go super sustainable, very low carbon, we are looking to put in some diesel recips to carry critical loads through the next major outage. We plan to take heat off them, and we also plan to pay for them by running them during the summer when they're trying to set our capacity and transmission tags. Those costs are so great that if we can avoid them, we can pay for the resiliency that we get from the diesel generators. We may also burn biodiesel in there to lower the carbon footprint when we do that. But the biodiesel has a bit of a carbon footprint, and we're not quite sure how we're going to address that into the future.
Mary, did you want to? Yeah, please, Mary.
Just, I wanted to add, it's very important when you're talking about flexibility and resilience. Now they are so closely intertwined. More and more during the conversation we have heard how we have different assets, we have different systems, and we are combining them to create a more resilient grid. Beyond electrification, you can no longer just rely on one fuel, whether it's diesel or coal or whatever. You need to really diversify, and that flexibility and resilience, they are just so closely intertwined that we need to acknowledge them both as one almost.
Thank you. Yes, thanks, Mary. Lindsey?
I just wanted to add something to what Tom said about, and what you said, Rob, about preparing for sort of our community engagement when it comes to resiliency. And I don't know how true it is for those of you up here, but the CSU ended up during the pandemic being alternative care sites. And you can argue whether or not that's our role and our responsibility. The fact of the matter is, if you are a university in a community, people are going to see you as a hub, even if it's just a place to gather, and ideally a place to gather safely. Also, just because you might be the only place in the area that has room, a gym, an auditorium, someplace where people can be. So I think when we're thinking about our resiliency, we've got the utility component, which agree with Sally, it depends on who your provider is. It's a totally different approach depending on who works with you. But also with your backup technologies, thinking about what you need to support beyond what your faculty wants, their electromagnet and their research facility that they want to make sure, their vivariums, make sure those are operational, but also you may have to operate something that seems totally innocuous on the front end. Why would we need to have our gym operational in an emergency? So depending on what that emergency is, especially in an increased climate sensitivity environment, I think it's an important consideration also.
And and Lindsey, just to agree that the world we live in today, you can, and even Toronto, I think, Ron, you can have a minus 40 day, and then 108 days, 110 degree day, and then sprinkle in 40 inches of rain, sprinkle in, some, maybe not an earthquake in Toronto, but is there an expectation that, as you mentioned, Lindsey, that the campus will be a lifeboat, an area of refuge, and maybe it isn't in your in your business plan, but from a community, if you haven't opened your gym, and, I think God bless, like, events like Katrina, right, in the Astrodome, and is that now really something that you have to have as a second-tier kind of consideration?
I don't think you get to choose it.
It's an expectation,
Yeah,
right?
that's what's interesting about it, is that you could say, that's not our role, that we're not going to do that, but the community will show up. We learned that from the pandemic, we learned that from Katrina, we learned that from Superstorm Sandy, that the community will decide, I don't care what your policies are, I need a place, I've got kids, I need a place to store medication, things like that. So, and then of course we have our students to think about, especially those who are maybe out of state or out of country that don't have a place to go and need to be looked after in the event of an emergency. So that's what's uniquely challenging about that consideration when it comes to resiliency, is that you're not the decision maker in that situation.
And I recall my wife graduated from Fairfield University, also Superstorm Sandy, small microgrid, and they have, I don't know how many hundreds of students living near campus, in old homes on the beach. And they, if my child was away at college, I'd like to know that there was a roof over their head and, a warm meal. So, Ron, is that part of the planning with Project LEAP in Toronto?
Well, I think it goes beyond that into our strategic plan and the utilities master plan. And for us, especially during the pandemic, to jump on your example, we actually did become a bit of a center. We ran some of the largest vaccine clinics because we had the space. We had our faculty of medicine, our faculty of pharmacy contributes. We had the resources when the health system was overwhelmed. But you could actually, and I would argue we have successfully leveraged that and made it an advantage. And what I mean by that specifically is we've got some of our places designated as emergency centers, such that if there is a crisis, the city knows they can come to us. And we could actually leverage that in return. And bring it back to the district energy system, when it comes to the numerous sort of approvals that we need to get a pipe under a street, things like that, especially in a very urban, dense downtown setting. We can bring it back to the city and say, you need us to be this emergency center. We really need to get this infrastructure below ground so we can do that. And it helps, and it actually makes them a bit of a partner.
Oh, I see. So you're saying that instead of having like the resistance or indifference of the, maybe the, local utility, that there's you engage them in being sort of a partner. Yeah.
A couple of years back, we had to get a line underneath a very busy street. It had a streetcar, it had a subway station there, and we had, it was the water department that was like, you need to say, I speak in metric, I'm sorry, but you need to stay 5 meters away from our pipe. What is that, 15, 16 feet away from their pipe for us to be able to put our infrastructure in. And it, in essence, made it impossible for us to do this expansion of the system. But we were able then to reach out to the city, have a conversation with them. It actually went all the way to city council, where they instructed the water department to cooperate and put our pipe in.
No joke. I was helping the city of New York, with some planning, et cetera, and there was a pilot project for geothermal in Manhattan, and they said, what, we just ran into a roadblock. The water, department wants, a 15-foot halo, right, underground around their water pipe. I'm like, okay, I don't know, that doggone hunt. But so let's talk a little bit. Thanks, Ron. I mean, these are interesting considerations. I don't think they're necessarily. I think when you signed on for this job, maybe they weren't necessarily in your job description. Paul, is there something you wanted to add? Or?
Yeah, I do. So there's the macro resiliency and there's micro resiliency. So we don't generate any power on grounds except for some small PV. So we're totally dependent on the utility provider for our power. We have a great relationship with Dominion. Bob Blue sits on our board of visitors, and we have just a really good working relationship, which helps a lot. We did have a small macro event, a derecho, that sort of illustrated our susceptibility to the above ground feeds to our substations. We had multiple feeds, but in a city like Charlottesville, that's just a tree city, we quickly found out that there's some macro vulnerability in our power supply. And I don't consider, unless you generate it like a lot of you all do, you can't consider electricity a firm field, right? So you have to have a backup. But at the same time, we were having a lot of micro-resiliency issues. Our researchers were complaining about the momentary power losses, and so little power blips.
Right.
We have a lot of research, and so we went to Dominion, and they said, well, you don't have any power losses. So they said a power loss to them is like 3 minutes, and a power loss to us is like a fraction of a second.
Yeah.
And so we sort of had to explain to them that, you know, those little blips were really impacting our research community. So we partnered and built a multi-mile underground express duct bank to 2 of our major substations. So we went from the transmission with dedicated feeders to our substations. And since the completion of that project, we've had zero power events. So that's resolved. And so it gave us both macro reliability and micro reliability or resiliency.
Good points. Thanks very much, Paul. So that wasn't rain on the roof I was hearing. Was that Paul's microphone? So team, clean up that power, would you? No, I get it. Thanks very much, Paul. So looking ahead, and Megan, I'm gonna lob this one to you, okay? So what would you say are the primary challenges, you know, that kind of, you know, make your world? Let me just, settling on a technology, the capital requirements to implement, scale or size of the challenge, like is it, you know, bite of the apple, whole apple, maybe a pie, the sequence or logistics, like, okay, how do we do this, the sequencing, or maybe even finding a partner, right? I mean, I think some of the scale of these projects might even benefit from, you know, the lift of a private organization. But Megan, Big Sky Country, what are the things that inform your travel over the bridge?
Yeah, definitely. I think a couple of the things that you've touched on, we have, dealt with the technology piece. We have a good foundation of where our technology is and where it will go, especially in our variety of solutions and that decentralized model that we have. The part that will continue to be the most challenging is the capital, you know, the funding required. The other piece is we seem to have, you know, quite managed, and we have a plan moving forward. How fast we can go will really depend on the amount of money we can put into the solution.
Yeah, so therein lies the problem. You have an expectation of clean, reliable, unbreakable power, area of refuge. You know, you have to. It's like Ginger Rogers said. Yeah, we're a great dance couple, but I did it backwards and in heels, right? I mean, it's sort of an expectation that. So, but what are there primary challenges? Sally, can I go to you? Yeah.
Sure. I see 2 primary challenges.
2.
Money. I mean, I'm sure that resonates with many people here. We're fortunate enough to have gotten $249 million of support directly from the state for our project. Okay. That's about half of what we need for our phase 1.
And you're talking about Berkeley now.
I'm sorry, I'm just talking about Berkeley, yeah. And so finding that other half in order to do our phase 1 is going to be challenging and critical. The other, because we are about to embark on implementing our project, and we're full on in design now, doing this, just physically doing this project, tearing up an entire landlocked, hilly, congested, old campus to replace its entire infrastructure system is daunting. And so just the reality of what that's going to take and how long it's going to disrupt the campus is really starting to sink in.
Yeah. Disruption, progress, innovation, disruption.
Yes. Hand in hand.
Yeah. Anyone else? You know, what is there? And something that keeps you awake at night? Mary, Lindsey? Yeah.
I'll take a stab at it. Just one. Okay, so I think changing the status quo is something that involves, it may be one other thing to consider, but it involves many things. It involves changing your business models. Are you now willing to go into a P3, maybe energy as a service, something that you haven't explored? Are you going to be using CCDC2 in Canada for construction, or are you going to go to an alternative method for construction? you need to change a lot of things. You need to change about many different variables. And just managing that change is also part of the complication. You're already trying to manage your capital with the competing needs that we all have. You have the logistics of how do you keep the campus operating while you're doing these massive projects? When do I invest this technology? So many moving parts. And at the same time, you also need to retrain your team. You need to train your stakeholders. You need to have the procurement guidelines and follow their procedures. So all of these moving parts, changing the status quo, finding the time to change it, the effort and the resources to do it is part of the challenge itself.
Yeah, it's sort of like, the patients on the table, spread. You got to keep them alive too, right? Sorry, that was a really gross metaphor. As I'm saying it, I'm thinking, but.
We're going to rob Berkeley, so lock your doors.
Yeah, hold on to your wallets. Here we come. Again, so anyone else care to comment? I mean, so I didn't mean to limit it to one thing, but certainly, resources, scale, reality, challenging. But Tom, and Tom, I mean, you've just drilled like 800 800-foot boreholes, right, on campus. Is that cool with everybody, or?
So we're not only putting 800 bores on, we put 2 new plants, and we're building an engineering building and environmental sciences. We're putting a new art museum in, yada, yada, yada. The whole campus is torn up.
Yeah.
And that is not particularly good. And, when we're getting blamed for tearing up the campus, we say, well, what about these guys? We're all doing this, blaming the other project. But the university has now gone and had a really good communications program. And around all the sites, they're communicating what the projects are for, especially the hot water and geo-exchange. And the students are so on board with the sustainability piece and the low carbon of the new plant that it really cuts down on the complaints. But there's one other thing that I want to address on resources that we really haven't done here is that, the Inflation Reduction Act, the IRA, there's a lot of money out there. We're going to be looking to get some of the IRA money because we're going to be spending so much in the future. The state of New Jersey also has some really good rebate programs, especially for batteries. So we're going to be looking at utility scale batteries. So, and I know we're all looking for money, but you should look for the IRA and any state programs that are out there.
Yeah, and just a liner note on the IRA. Mark Spur at lunch will be talking about the Inflation Reduction Act, what district energy components qualify for it, et cetera. It won't be a full granular consultancy, but we're mindful. IDEA has been commenting to the IRS so far. It looks like the project at Princeton would essentially fit in the. In some of the requirements.
And we'll get a lot of the bonus points.
Right.
But you also have to involve your tax consultant because it is quite complex, and there's a lot of bookkeeping.
Yes, yep. The Full Employment Act for accountants. Gerry, something to add, yes.
I was going to point out a paradox I'm starting to just see now, and I have to address it. I'm a mechanical engineer, so by background, we've electrified predominantly. We still have some gas going into our main district heating system, but I'm leading a study right now looking at hundreds of gas meters on the periphery of our campus, small buildings, distributed systems. These are hard, and I'm not bragging about that. I'm kind of spying on my colleagues because they're addressing that now, and they're going to leapfrog us, and hopefully we can pick up some pieces there. Another unique thing about being in California is our grid is already pretty green, and it's getting greener. We've had the luxury at Stanford because we're a direct access power customer. I won't get into that, but we have off-site solar power purchase agreement facilities, very large, and so we generate a lot of renewable energy credits. So under current reporting guidelines, that's 100% clean electricity, right? Even though we're buying in and out of the grid. I've been in energy efficiency for many years. We do very large energy efficiency projects on campus, but those darn Scope 3 people just keep tearing away at me. In fact, they say, Gerry, you realize the remaining scope 1 and 2 is this big. I go, no, it's this big. And they go, I know, well, let's put the scale, Gerry. It's this big, and our scope 3 is like this. So what do I say? Are you saying I'm unimportant? Our infrastructure is not important? That's not true, right? That's not the right message. The other thing is I had someone else come to me just last week and said, oh, we can do an analysis. We can tell you exactly what the embodied carbon is on any retrofit project you do on campus, from the air handler you bring in, from the controllers you bring in, from the labor to install it. And I go, what are you telling me? I can't afford to save carbon because it's going to add carbon. So we're starting to see these paradoxes, because if I retrofit electricity, I'm not going to save anything on my electricity, although my community, the region's going to benefit from lower demand, more electricity is going to be available. So from a technological standpoint, I think our models are going to have to start to update as well. How are we doing this master modeling? Because again, if I'm coming from a grid that's got a large carbon content and I got a lot of gas and I'm just starting, it's a no-brainer. But once you start getting lower,
Right.
Zero starts looking real funny.
That last 10%, right?
Yeah, it's-
finding that last marble out of the bag.
Yeah.
And don't you dare touch faculty travel, by the way. We all know who rules the roost. So I believe we have a 10 a.m. close, right? I mean, right? So I'm not gonna. I may give you back some of your life, but two more questions for the group, okay? We did touch on stakeholders, so who are the most kind of important, groups in your world? Is it trustees, the board, is it faculty, is it students? Sometimes is it the media, something maybe goes awry? Are there audiences that, you really have to maintain a bridge with? Megan, what do you think?
Yeah, great question. At MSU, we have a lot of support from our campus stakeholders. So our students, our staff, our administration, they're all on board. A unique situation that maybe is not applicable to the other panelists up here is we don't have state mandates or requirements in Montana.
Yeah.
So our government stakeholders are really the group that we will need to work with the closest to, I think, accelerate some of the low carbon solutions on campus.
Yeah, and if you talk to, Montana, Wyoming, it's a very different, local economic, consideration. Who else? Lindsey, important voices?
Yeah, I have an unpopular opinion, I think, on this. I think we've already achieved the stakeholder engagement at the student level, for the most part, even at the faculty level, the community level. And that's a blessing of being in California, I think, for one thing. And then, students are always on the kind of cutting edge of social and sociological changes. What my time serving on a campus and my time with the CSU and in higher ed in general has shown me is that leadership is still the most important people to engage. When a campus president wants to do something, things happen. And I think one of the things we've found is that while there's a lot of I'll use the term lip service, and I don't mean it, sort of in a condescending way, but while that exists and there's a lot of belief and stressed importance around sustainability and climate change, when the rubber meets the road, and by that I mean when you have to decide not to balance an academic program on the back of a facilities cut, what decision gets made? Every time. And I think until leadership is in a position where they feel comfortable, and that's our job, right, to give them the economic pro forma to say, you can do this, or the cost of doing nothing, the social cost of carbon, the cost of resiliency, so that they can make the quote-unquote right decision for the purposes of this discussion. Until we can do that and get them really to say, okay, we're going to stop robbing Peter to pay Paul, and these organizations, especially organizations like ours, which has no state funding. That's not explicitly true, but very, very little state funding. We haven't gotten any appropriations or any allocations from the state, and our state contribution has been dwindling over the last 20 years. We can't balance it on the backs of students either. So that means really difficult financial decisions made at the top levels.
And let me ask this, so students, so they're engaged, they want to sort of be part of a more sustainable campus. Mary, you wanted to add? Yeah.
I think that's the double-edged sword when it comes to the students. They can become your biggest supporters or your biggest roadblock, which is a very interesting dichotomy. We've seen in other institutions in Ontario where they have struggled. They have had hunger strikes and students blocking a $10 million project because they don't want any generators for peak shaving because they run on natural gas. And the president had to meet with them, and there was this whole consultation, and the students were not giving them 1 meter or 1 inch even. Yes, they were very adamant about it, yeah. But it was just unreal. It's the same group you're trying to engage. It's the same group that can be hindering your progress. And as my colleagues in that university were explaining to them, this is going to enable us to have more capital availability. It's going to just help us get where we need to be to invest in more decarbonization. The students were not having any of it. So it's interesting how they can become your advocates and really have that pressure on leadership itself to convert to decarbonize. But some groups maybe not recognize the value of some of the decisions made by leadership either.
Yeah, it's interesting because, I mean, in some cases, it's like, no gas, no where, no how. One of our members even had, not long after he took on this new job, there was a student protest. They had handcuffed themselves to a fence, right? So that's how, I mean, it's well-meaning, maybe underinformed, right? But is that part of the challenge in your role?
Yeah,
Sally?
I'll speak to that. I mean, as we know, Berkeley students are not shy, and they started out somewhat not hostile to the project at all, but hostile to the pace. They really fundamentally thought we could turn off cogen like tomorrow. And once we explained to them the timeline that it actually takes to implement something like this and brought them on, they did become our biggest advocate. And I spoke earlier of the money we got from the state. A lot of that is down to the students, both going directly to the legislature and advocating for the project that we had explained to them and brought them into as part of the process, and then with our Chancellor, that not just advocating in general for this conversion, but this specific project, and how we were going to do it, and the timeline, because we had brought them into the process and engaged them in not exactly planning and approval, but just an understanding of what we were going to do. So we're very grateful to our students.
That's fascinating, like mobilizing, sort of like get out the vote sort of effort.
We gave them talking points.
Wow, good for you. That's a takeaway, ladies and gentlemen. Activate. Ron? Thank you, Sally.
I would say, I don't know if I could pick one stakeholder group that's more important, but what I thought I'd share is almost like what our stakeholder strategy is. And I always joke around with my government relations partners that I've got a red tie and I got a blue tie, and it depends who I'm talking to. And we're from Canada, so I also have an orange tie, which we can talk about later. And in short, it depends who I'm going to, it depends who we're talking to, right? So if we go back to Project LEAP, it's a big $150 million project. If I'm talking to the federal government, we'd be talking about carbon. They're really into that. We go to the provincial government, if you know our politics, oh my God, they couldn't care less about carbon, universities as well. And so there we're talking about jobs. We're talking about the fact that we're going to create this many jobs in downtown Toronto, and we've got an economic crisis, and that's important. We get them on board that way. We go to our governance. I talk to, depends who in the room. Sometimes it's about carbon, or sometimes it's about we have a 10% return on our equity. And they're really excited about that. And that's how we compete on the capital front with other initiatives. So I guess my takeaway there is that I got the multiple ties, I got the multiple folders, and it depends who I'm talking to.
Yeah, right. Know your audience, right?
It's all multifaceted, and if you could figure out how to weave that messaging and to deliver it to the right place at the right time, you'll have success.
Good advice. Thank you, Ron. Gerry?
I want to give you folks an example, and just like I wouldn't tell the heart surgeon how to operate on me, right? He's the expert. We get a lot of input like, when are you guys going to put more PV on the roofs? There's so many roofs without PV. We have 4.5 megawatts on our roofs.
Oh.
To add any more, it's really expensive, crazy expensive. The cost per kilowatt, a kilowatt hour of the life, there's so much we could do, efficiency. We're procuring off the grid really affordably, and so you got to sit there and have conversations. And I tend to interact more with faculty, and it's a hard thing to break this concept that, well, for decades we thought this was the path, you have to do this. And what we're finding was, no, there's some subtleties. Why do we want PV on the roofs? We already have enough RECs, we can't get a benefit there. Well, maybe it's distributed energy, it's a resilience component. I go, good, we're onto something there. Maybe we should be investing those dollars into batteries then, for, let's do an economic analysis. The benefit plus, then we can play the market a little bit, goes into resilience. Maybe we don't need as many generators on campus if we have batteries. So start bringing in these other things. And then they just kind of roll their eyes at me and walk away, because I kind of I ruin their world. But it's not just faculty. I think it's our community, right? Our extended community, whether it's people from the city, the county,
Right.
very rich neighbors who come in and say, you're not doing this right. And we're saying, listen, we want to hear what you have to say, but just know we've been doing this for a while. We've been developing models. And sometimes once you start getting down into the 50% reduction or more, the models come up with some different answers.
Well, and Gerry, let's admit, a lot of district energy is underground, out of sight, out of mind, right? And actually, like, you don't really want to be visible in some ways. And when stuff happens with the grid or a climate event, they just want you to work. But maybe some PV on the roof, that's visible, sort of an indicator. It's maybe not moving the needle at all, really on your challenges. So I want to, does anyone care to add on the stakeholders? So I'm going to wrap it now with kind of a 24-second clock for each of you. But Paul, anything to add on community, stakeholders, UVA?
Go for it. There we go. For us?
There you go.
All right. For us, it's clearly our executive leadership. So our sustainability folks were very effective in convincing the executive leadership to endorse our sustainability goals, but they didn't have a clear line of sight of the investment necessary.
Right.
So now it's our job to start explaining the cost and how we're going to do it and developing a strategy that we can afford, and that's very difficult. So the more we can educate them on the technologies, the costs, and the challenges, I think that's where my focus is now. Trying to just convince them that we have a coal-fired plant that we would like to convert to a less, to electricity and gas is a hard sell because it involves a capital investment. So it's just getting the stakeholders engaged, the executive leadership to support the capital plan required to reach our sustainability goals.
Well, and Paul, it's not unlike, someone saying to you, okay, get to Napa, and you got to be there in an hour. And then it's like, okay, how, and you got to drive the car, right, and navigate the traffic and the roadblocks and et cetera, right? So, all right, let me bring the sort of a last thought from everybody. So from where you sit, right, what advice, and really, I want to thank you for the advice you've already provided. Some very nice, I think, kernels, takeaways. Thank you for that. But what advice would, you give our audience, back to this, bridge metaphor car? Go full EV. Don't worry about it. The grid will get there. Well, maybe think about a hybrid because sometimes the sun doesn't shine and, you want to have an option. Maybe there's going to be potholes, right? So plan ahead and budget the time. Road construction to be expected. Or finally, is it, if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there? Clearly it's not among all of you. But sort of last thought, what advice would you give to someone who's really just loading the trunk, getting in the car, heading to a lower carbon future? Is there one thought? Tom, you're looking at me, so I'm going to go with you.
I would recommend using your metaphor to go plug-in hybrid.
Plug-in hybrid. Okay.
You have that engine when you need it, but and as I said, we're putting in the diesels so that we have the reliability when we need it. So that's the bit of the plug-in. We also, we have a geo-exchange system, and to be able to heat the entire campus on a 0-degree day, just using those bores, we would need a lot more bores.
right.
And that's where the money is. They're very expensive. So again, using the metaphor, the plug-in hybrid, we do have some small boilers for peaking. Again, we want to burn biodiesel if possible, and there are some other kind of renewable fuel. Again, it still has a little bit of carbon footprint. So we're not going to be pure zero carbon footprint. We're trying to figure that last little bit out, but plug-in hybrid.
Very good. Thank you, Tom. Who's next? Mary?
Yes, I'm going to be a little bit disruptive, but I would say you need many vehicles. You need maybe a big truck, and then you need to put a bike on the back too, because the roads are, the part of the road is built, and you know where you're going, and you can see 100 miles ahead. But once you get there, we don't know the future. We know that the world will change, regulations will change, the environment will change. So what will you need? We don't know. So just keep in the back a bike, maybe a pair of running shoes, who knows? Maybe you'll need to run the last mile. But just keep an eye open and bring them up with you, because the only constant that we are finding these days is change. We need to be prepared for anything. We need to be able to switch gears and pivot as we need. So really, it's keep everything that you can bring with you and be ready.
Good advice. Thank you. Lindsey? Thanks very much, Mary.
No idea how to address this metaphor. I guess my recommendation would be whatever the vehicle you choose to use, and I like Mary's example of multiples, would be to cover them with branded stickers and make sure you're doing a lot of marketing. So in terms of investments on your campus, I recommend you hire someone who knows how to market your program and a data visualization expert that knows how to make the numbers look pretty so that you can sell these efforts to the campus and community stakeholders.
So while their path from dorm to class to CAF has been disrupted, and where they used to play Frisbee is under construction, and maybe they're only on campus for 4 years, and they're having to suffer through this, transition. So your advice is hire people that can really help you communicate. Don't just do it yourself.
As engineers, I don't know, but I think we have a reputation for not being the best communicators. Sometimes we're a little dry.
I think you guys did good, though. I think you did good. Thank you. You don't have to hang with the metaphor, but Megan, over to you.
Yeah.
What advice?
I would say just get in the car and get on the highway. Whatever car you have, start driving. At MSU, we're really proud of our low carbon journey, and that has been taking advantage of the opportunities as they come by and being selective and being strategic. And if we can do it, anybody can do it. We've proven that over 15 years, if you put it together, it turns into something big. So I would just encourage, get in the car and start driving.
Get moving. Very good. Thank you, Megan. Sally? I want to call you Mary. I'm not sure, but...
It ends in Y. So. I would say, to use the analogy, be prepared for a very long road. Yeah. It's going to have potholes, it's going to have flat tires, it's also going to have stretches of beautiful banked road with a view, and just be prepared to stick it out, because at Berkeley we started this in 2015, and we're just getting into full design. So you have to be ready, and you have to be determined.
It is a long road, isn't it? The time scale isn't tomorrow. And really, the bridge. It isn't just a bridge to the future, but it really is a time scale challenge as well. Anyone else, Gerry? Final thought?
I wanted to touch on a few things. We talked about outreach and marketing. I think we all need to have a good PR consultant firm available. We talked about master planning. You've got to have the master plan. You've got to communicate that to a very broad audience. You've got to have many of those audience members invested in that master plan. And just the additional example here is you can't get into a 10-year, 20-year implementation plan and have one of your stakeholders, a regulator, the air district, somebody come to you after year 5 and say, oh, you can't do this. We changed our rules. So there is a technical component to this. I can't do PR, but I would find somebody who could and keep everybody on the road together, because you can't have people veering off just because the style changes.
This journey, right? It's like, okay, who's in the car, who's in the back seat? Can you decide what radio station we're going to listen to? There's a lot of backseat drivers in this, and I or maybe they're children, you just got to feed them from time to time, or a puppy, you got to, I mean, so planning and adaptation. Paul, I'm going to go to you, and then I'm going to finish with Ron. Paul?
All right, yeah, it's a fleet of vehicles. We're
Fleet.
maintaining our old trucks and our old cars.
Yep.
And we're buying brand new EVs, and then it's, depending on where we are, we have some plug-in hybrids. But it depends also.
Right.
So it depends on your stakeholders, your budget, and your regional geographics, right, geography. Right. And so, but the solution to everybody's decarbonization is in this room somewhere, right? So I encourage you to talk and look to the folks that have done what you think, fits your university, and go tease out the details, get some ideas of costs and technologies, and use that to help inform your leadership and start to develop your plan, because the solution's in this room somewhere.
That's a good point, Paul, that, others have driven the road. Was it bumpy? How, how's it look? Well, et cetera. So don't reinvent the wheel. Really sort of, borrow and make it next generation. So Ron, I guess, a final thought, what advice, Project Leap, just leap and have a parachute, or how does it look?
Yeah, no, I think it's a great start. Definitely a leap. I think what jumps to mind to me are the three principles that we had in our strategy. And the first of which is conservation first. Just quite simply, if you can reduce what you consume, it doesn't matter how you're generating it. There's no emissions there. There's no cost there. Right? The second one is balancing carbon with cost. And what I mean by that is that we know that these are expensive, but if you can come up with a way to balance it and a way to make it financially feasible, then you'll get those approvals that you need. And the last principle that we utilize is fostering innovation. And all of us have absolutely amazing, bright minds on our campuses, from our faculties, our students, our staff. And the more you can engage them, I can guarantee you're going to come up with some really innovative, amazing solutions. Not all of them will be feasible, but there's always going to be a nugget in there that you can implement.
Well, very good advice. I want to thank you all for being available, for your preparation, for your sharing, really, I think, the experience. This journey that we're all on, it's a difficult one. And, there's really no single path, no single vehicle. But I really do appreciate, both your candor and your constructive advice. And ladies and gentlemen, would you please join me in thanking our panelists for Thank you. That was awful nice. That was awful nice of you.